Hi, everyone. Right. As you can see, we have another panel discussion here. Fantastic to see so many people. Are you waving at me, by the way? No, you're not, are you? No. Great to see so many people in the room. For people who are not in the room, so all our virtual audience, a little wave to you. Don't want to feel like you're being left out. The room is almost full here. I think the capacity of this room is about 300 at my last rough count. And yesterday, I think we had 2,500 people watching the live stream as well. So no need to worry about a big audience, everybody. These sessions are also going to be available to watch on demand as well, post-event. But this is the ESG Forum. And now, a bit like yesterday, we're having one of our dinner party sessions, effectively. Our fine panelists have never met each other before. So there is no collusion, there's no collaboration going on. And they're going to get to know each other, just like we're going to get to know them as well. So I'm hoping that we're going to have some interesting conversations. We're going to find out a little bit about all of them, see where there's some common ground where it comes to ESG, and where there's hopefully a bit of debate. Let's see. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves, starting on my far right with Aline.
Okay, well, I'm the one that came furthest from, I think. I'm Spanish. I came this morning from Madrid. I'm currently leading the sustainability department in ASISA, which is Spain's largest healthcare group. I'm also running the startup that we founded 5 years ago, which is also into healthcare, and happy to be here with all of you.
Come on.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carmel Giblin. I'm the CEO of an organisation called the ICTI Care Foundation. And we are primarily responsible for the implementation and development of a program called the ICTI Ethical Toy Program. So I have spent the last 20 or so years looking at labour standards and environmental risks in global supply chains. Delighted to be here.
I'm Phil Halanen. I'm the head of sourcing and sustainability for Wyndham Hotels and Resorts EMEA. I've been at Wyndham for about 5 years, and before that I was in the aviation sector. A little bit about Wyndham. We're the world's largest hotel franchisor. We have about 9,100 hotels globally across 24 brands, and a loyalty program of approximately 100 million members.
That's huge.
It is quite big.
Hi, everybody. I'm Courtney Holm. I work for Capgemini Invent, and I lead our sustainability go-to-market. So I'm vice president of our Sustainable Futures team. And then I work across the UK and Northern Central European region, helping our clients to decarbonize and to improve their supply chains. So we cover the gamut of ESG.
Okay, please do welcome our panel.
Thank you.
Okay, well, someone has to start this dinner party conversation, and that person is not going to be me, it's going to be Courtney.
Oh.
I've just decided.
Great.
So, Courtney, obviously you're talking to your fellow guests and our audience here. What are the key drivers of ESG integration in corporate strategies, would you say?
You know, I'll kick off, but I think that I'll deflect the conversation to my fellow panelists. What I see a lot happening within organizations is that ESG becomes an afterthought. It becomes something that's a little bit separate, not embedded into strategies. And then by consequence, it has a separate budget. So it doesn't receive the same budgeting requirements as other key parts of the strategy that focus more on exponential growth. So I think from my perspective, that's what I see. What do you see, Colleen? I think, or Carmel?
I'd agree, but I think it's changing.
Yeah.
I do think it's becoming a bit more central to general corporate strategy and decision making. And that's a really positive thing. It's driven, I think historically, ESG was driven by stakeholder expectations that were predominantly maybe influenced by consumers. And we know that consumers may say one thing, but may act in a different way. So convincing your head of procurement or your chief financial officer that doing something differently is going to drive consumer sales often didn't really land because it's not necessarily true. As much as we'd like it to be, it's not necessarily true. But I think if you look to where we are now, we've got regulation that is driving compliance, and that's putting it very much on the corporate agenda. But I think if we just look at business and strategic planning, companies are now looking at efficiencies and other areas that actually can give them competitive advantage or can make them more successful companies by being more efficient, and some of that is driven through sustainability actions. So I think the business case is becoming more holistic and therefore easier for the C-suite to agree to.
I totally agree with that. And I was in my prep just before coming on stage, was looking at our own ESG report, and we were looking at all of who our stakeholders were. And 5 years ago, I would have said there were probably 2 stakeholders. It would have been our customers and perhaps our investors. There's now 7 stakeholders. It's your employees, it's your suppliers, it's your investors, it's obviously your franchisees, it's your end guests, it's all of these people together. And each one of those has a different set of expectations, which helps to drive the agenda, which I would say is still too reactive. It's not proactive enough. But in that, I think your point is right. It's about being able to derive a source of new added value out of that, whether that be through a supply chain efficiency, through reducing SKUs and harmonizing spec to make use of less material, a shorter supply chain so you get a better price, but then also you're ultimately providing a product that's more sustainable in a kind of physical way. So all of these stakeholders are getting together to be able to create that extra value and deliver something that's sustainable, obviously environmentally, but also from a social perspective, on top of being financially sustainable.
Well, I think I'm the one that has less experience in sustainability at all, because I just started this position 1 year ago. But when I started, I had already talked with so many CSOs in other companies, some of them competitors from the company I work for, and they always had the problem that they weren't taken seriously, right? So chief sustainability officer was something that companies wanted to have because it looked good, but then they would be like pushed apart. So when they offered me to become one, I was like, no, I don't want to take it, because I mean, I just don't want to have the role. So they were like, no, we really want to do things. It's taking some time to get the buy-in, and I think the buy-in comes from the fact that it's not sustainable if it's not profitable. So if you have a company that looks at you as the new corporate social responsibility, then you're in the wrong place. If you manage to shift that view into something that is really going to bring the long term into the business, then they're going to take you seriously. Then you're going to be in the exco. Then you're going to be where you have to be and where your voice is heard, which I think is what we need to do, right?
And I think we've got a kind of interesting example about, I think you raised the point, Courtney, about, or Phil, around your employees. So in my sort of work, particularly over the last 2 decades, particularly looking at manufacturing workers in developing countries, places like India, China, etc., workers were a commodity, and we could lose 500 tomorrow, but that's no problem because we'll have another 500 waiting at the factory doors for work. That's not the reality anymore. So factory owners have changed, and as much of the work that we do is around worker well-being and understanding the needs of workers and responding to them, and no longer is setting up childcare or whatever it may be a philanthropic act. It's actually a business strategy to retain and attract workers.
Can I throw the first hand grenade? Sorry.
Okay.
This is the come dine with me moment.
I'm off.
I completely agree from the kind of traditional sort of offshore sourcing examples. So certainly if we're sourcing from China, and this won't all be about sourcing, I promise, but if you're getting goods from China, then I think that is definitely the case. Since the pandemic, we've been forced to source outside of China, so either going further south in South Asia or actually sourcing from India and Turkey. So Turkey to supply our European hotels and India to supply our Indian and Middle Eastern hotels. And it's great, it's got all of those advantages, but it's a bit like China sourcing was 35 years ago, where you're having to put all of this stuff back into place because it's not fundamentally there yet. So when me or the teams are going to visit factories where we want to source better products, more ethical products, ones that are going to be good value and also sustainable, we're having to go through that whole exercise again. But it's good because we've learned from the first time of doing it, and we can set the expectation up now and grow on it and say, no, you must treat workers properly. They must get a day off in 7. They must get everything that you would expect a worker in the UK to get. And so that's quite good. Would there be any learnings that you would say we need to take in from the outset?
I think definitely, and this is something that I've talked about for years, that often in my line of work or working for organisations like yours or Unilever or whoever it may be, it's the buying organisation that is doing something to the supplier, and they're not actually engaging the supplier in why and what's in it for them, apart from, yes, you'll get our business, but actually what's in it for their business and their sustainability and their performance. And that's what motivates. You have to have actions that are sustainable because they make business sense. So I think what we've learned from many years in doing it in China is that if we want other countries to get to the same place, we have to be different in our engagement. It can't be, you just have to do this. There has to be more care taken to engage, I think.
Can I ask a question? I personally believe that sustainable development is the investment opportunity of our time, and recreating these value chains is part of that critical investment. And I do think it's the opportunity to keep supply open and to keep people in work and gainfully employed and keep families going and to do so sustainably. Do you agree with that? And do you see your businesses responding in those ways as well?
100%.
Yeah.
I think it's a case where it's a bit peculiar in the business that we have. Obviously, we work in hotels, but hotels are very resource intensive. One of the things that's literally just sprung into my mind is, would it be the case that we could, as part of that whole education and trying to do the right thing, offer reciprocal roles from suppliers and put them into our positions, understand what's driving us, that kind of idea. But I totally agree with you. It is about that. Yeah. It's about that opportunity creation.
And each of us too, I mean, each of you work in industries that, driving behavior change is so critical. So enabling sustainable choices becomes fundamental, especially in healthcare, for example, and with toy purchasing as well, and of course when you're staying in a hotel. So how do you build in behavior change into your work?
That's a great question, because that's the question we're all asking each other, right?
Yeah.
We thought, when you start a sustainability department, the first thing that comes to mind is, of course, environmental action. So we all run and buy all these panels to create our own energy, and look at how much energy we are using. But then the real thing is not in the what you need, but how you need less, or doing things better, right? So it's easier in manufacturing. I'm not saying it's easy. It's easier when you have a physical product. When you have an insurance product, how do you deal with that? Or when you have like a digital product. So I think now technology is allowing us to go further into that. We just started with our first LCA in insurance, which we just literally started. We had to think very much about this. For those who don't know what that is you analyze the whole life cycle of a product. In this sense, it's an insurance product, in order to see where we can actually help our customers decide whether to act one way or the other. For example, of course, when you have an insurance policy, health insurance, you can decide to either go physically to your medical consultation or maybe have a video call, right? That's the easy part. But you can also, in the hiring process, you can also decide whether you want to do everything digital and don't have like a physical card, or no, I want to do the traditional way. And then there's so many parts of the process that we're, when you think about it, they just come out, I guess, like in normal manufacturing. And that is what. But when we actually asked our customers, we're like, would be interested in knowing your footprint from your insurance product? I thought people were going to say, no, I don't care. But actually people were like, yeah, I would appreciate, but only if I can do something about it. which is what is not happening many times in your bank. I don't know, if you probably all have a bank account. I keep on being told how much my footprint is. I'm like, how can I reduce it? They don't tell me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I think that's kind of an interesting point. And going back to the panel, the discussion that was immediately before it went, I was kind of sat there with some colleagues a bit horrified about some of the decisions that we've made or the choices you make, that I think part of making sustainable decisions as an individual is that you don't really know, because we thought, when COVID happened, as a result of that, we all stopped travelling as much as we did, and we've kept that commitment to travel less than we used to. Probably not good for your business, sorry. But we've kind of kept that. But we are back-to-back Zoom, Teams, all those kind of calls. And I'm horrified to learn that that is using more than the aviation industry. So we'll be better going back to Heathrow than we thought. So I think some of the difficulty with change is that we don't know which decisions to make.
Okay.
I totally agree. And yeah, it was difficult for our industry. I don't want to get into that in too much detail, but we are seeing a kind of rebound in that as hotels play much more of a community role as to the location where they are. And that kind of, for us, has been a bit of an ESG driver as well, because hotels naturally, in the environment in which they are, have a lot of impact. They employ people, they have an environmental impact of their operations, but then as a result, they have a duty of care to those people that they employ, to the environment in which it operates, but also to create something that the community can benefit from, as well as obviously the guests. Let's not forget that. So I think hotels have a great opportunity to really drive ESG holistically, not just the environmental bit, which we do spend an awful lot of time talking about, perhaps because it's the most immediately obvious, certainly when you go through a summer like we've just had, and the news we've been seeing in the UK at least. But it's important to let the people drive decisions that you're making from a holistic ESG perspective, and as a corporate you have to be open to have as much diversity and as much representation from as many different people that you possibly can have in order to create a business that's going to suit all of those people, because they all come from the community in which you're in. And regardless of the fact that we're the sort of the top co, and we work in franchisees, we like to operate in that same way and create a structure that our hotels can emulate and say, well, actually, we're going to do this holistic thing. Think about the role of the property in the community. We will give them ways to try and enable that, create extra money, basically, through enhanced procurement that they can invest in ESG principles, that kind of thing. So there's definitely the kind of strong people element driving that as well.
I love to talk about communities, actually. I talk a lot about communities, and I talk a lot about with adaptation strategies with communities, because I think it's the one point that we're like largely failing on, preparing people to protect assets and whatnot. So I think hotels are really interesting on this front, because you're such an integral part of the community, and the guests that stay in the hotel, they travel and traverse the local community, and you can, reinforce a lot of those key messages through how they behave and act in the community. Have you started working in that space at all?
It's this terribly phrased thing called guest education.
Yeah.
And we definitely need to rephrase that, because it sounds like you're coming to school, which is
Guest experience?
not necessarily. Guest experience is probably better. You can tell I don't work in PR. It is definitely a case of explaining to guests why a hotel is doing certain things, and we have the responsibility as the corporate part of our operation to give the answers for that. And it's really interesting. In different geographies, you have different attitudes. So, for example, a hotel in Germany, you might not have to explain to a guest why a water pressure is set at a certain level, why a temperature is set at a certain level in the room, why you've got dispensers rather than single bottles, yada yada. You go to a hotel in Bahrain, for example, that has a lot of Saudi guests, the expectation is that it's going to be a very luxurious experience. And so you have to explain to guests that have got a certain level of expectation why you've done a certain thing. That is very hard in certain markets. And I've just used those ones as examples. But it is important to do that. We speak this day in, day out. Everybody in this room speaks ESG as their bread and butter, but not everybody does yet. Or if they do, they hear it, and it's sort of delivered to you as a set of information, but you don't necessarily know why or connect what that is, what it is all about.
I don't want to pick on you in the hot, but I'm going to build on what you've just said.
I started.
Because I do think, I think there's that bit which is around, and I think you mentioned it, that when people start on their sustainability strategy or whatever, it's the low-hanging fruit. So, we change our light bulbs, or we ask our hotel guests, do they really want fresh towels every day, and things like that. I think one of the questions sometimes comes back is, what do you do? Those are driving savings in the business. Maybe not as big a savings as we might think or whatever, but you would imagine some of the activities is saving some money. Do corporates then make a commitment to say, okay, of the saving, we'll put a percentage actually into sustainable investments, or will, I don't know, that, you don't have to speak for the entire hospitality industry.
Some do and some don't, basically. But it's a great idea. One of the things that we try to do is anything that we can save. So I don't buy for hotels. We're a franchise business, so we're not actually doing any of that purchasing in this example. Other hotel companies who own or manage their assets do. What I do is anything that we save from a hotel perspective, we try to reinvest, not only in the department, so to have more resources, this, that, the other, this is from the procurement side, but use that saving to invest in either product innovation or run programs that hotels can take advantage of, that will continue to develop the sustainable offering. We're talking about physical product in this perspective. We're not doing much in the kind of the less tangible space, so the software space.
But I think that's a great question, because people,
it's really good.
Customers, when you talk to them about sustainability and would you like something circular, would you like something more sustainable, they're just thinking, you just want to save money and get a larger margin. So I think that this point is very important, to make them part of, first, being transparent, which enters in the G of governance, right? So what you're winning, which in my industry we're obliged to do anyways. I mean, we're in the same industry as the financial area, so we really have to be very transparent. But also, if you have more savings because you are doing, so for example, we're looking at this circular insurance product that we would measure how many emissions we get. We would have a product that generates less emissions, and when you generate less emissions, it's because you spend less, right? So if I don't have to have some person to be with you in a hotel 24 hours in the reception desk, I'm saving money. If I don't need to print papers and send you stuff, I'm saving money, millions and millions, because we're talking about millions of policyholders. But then we tell them those savings would. Our idea is that those savings go to compensate and to invest in. So the idea is not to make more money. It's probably to make the same money, but in a better way, and making everything more sustainable. Because otherwise, that's the perspective that customers have. It's like COVID. After COVID, it's like, no, you don't get served any drinks because of COVID. No, you don't get it because of COVID. Now sustainability is becoming the new COVID, right? So no, we're becoming sustainable. So we're not going to wash your bed sheets for 1 month in the hotel. And you're like, okay, well, I don't do that at home. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Select service.
No, and I think, and on kind of that whole thing, but of nearshoring as well. We know there's certainly environmental benefits of nearshoring, but there's financial benefits. But often when, we go back to this comment I made at the very beginning, that when we talk about kind of sourcing ethically or buying ethically, people will say yes, but actually because it's a premium, all too often they don't, and maybe they can't. So it's not just, it's not a choice thing. Sometimes they just don't have the income to be able to make that choice. But yet companies are, why does being ethical in your sourcing have to be more expensive, or as a consumer? And I think that's part of the question, that sometimes sustainability can be seen as a little bit elitist.
I think that's a great statement. And it's a tricky one to try and get over it. It seems as if you can get to this barrier where it is seen as an elitist thing. And that is fundamentally a failure then of the businesses that are not able to communicate it properly. And we come back to that point about explaining to people why you're doing something. I'd echo the fact, I was about to say opinion, but it's not. I think I'd echo the fact that customers are also very price inelastic. Yeah. We work on a metric called ADR, which is average daily rate, which is how much it costs you to stay in a hotel. And the ADR for more sustainable hotels is actually it's a little bit higher because the cost of operating more sustainably is a little bit higher. So we survey our rewards members and our loyalty members. They all say, yeah, we definitely pay more for sustainable accommodation. But then when you take an actual snapshot of where those most sustainable properties are versus the ones that aren't quite so far down the journey, you're not seeing an advantage for it.
But couldn't you subsidize the cost savings that you get to make all the hotels the same price?
Yes, you could. I'll have to refer that one to the board. But,
But I think
You wanted someone to be provocative.
Yeah.
it's very provocative.
But I think that's a really good point as well, because we have this thing where companies are making really, really big commitments around sustainability, and they're making their products and so on. But they will also have a travel policy or whatever for their staff that doesn't support being sustainable, because actually, if there is a premium, you're still not you, but your company may be saying, actually, this is how much we'll spend on a hotel room, and it's not necessarily the sustainable option.
Absolutely.
I'm a huge fan of internal carbon taxes or ESG taxes. We could go, broader beyond taxes, but when you penalize poor behavior inside the organization, whether it's a travel policy or a procurement policy that goes unmet, and then you tax that part of the business and you put it into a slush fund, and the slush fund then pays for sustainability related activities, making more of your hotels more sustainable, or investing in.
It's certainly one way of
projects.
driving behaviours in big corporates, I think. So again, it's a good idea, but it has limitations that you would need to assess. But it's certainly one way of tackling the problem.
I just think that taxing is always negative.
It's a bad word, though, isn't it? Yeah.
So people don't take it. For example, when you're asking your customers to would you like to pay a little bit more, like they don't. When you ask your employees to behave a little bit better, otherwise you get taxed. It's so negative. On the other hand, you can do it the other way around. You can incentivize. So those people that are doing the same job as you are, moving less, and then those people have and then that ball can go into whatever you want, but then it can have your name.
You could call it a carbon benefit, and it's just that the benefit goes to someone else.
Exactly. You can choose. The thing is that if you're the one that gets it, you choose where to allocate it.
I think it's quite interesting. Take it all back to the people thing again. So we've just gone through a bit of recruitment for the team I'm working in, and every single person who was either shortlisted or longlisted all asked questions about ESG. It's how sustainable are you? What do you do about diversity, equity, and inclusion? What do you do about this, that, and the other? And I think as new generations come through into the workforce, they themselves will start to drive things. I'm speaking for myself here, but I'm the old fusty one now. It's the new generation who's making me think about what value I can bring to them so that I can get the best talent into my team. So that is definitely driving a change. And there's not really much appetite from the people I see interviewing and applying to do business in the old way. They don't want to be flung around the world every day of the week. They don't want to be seen to be profiting at the detriment of the planet's resources or the planet's communities and those sorts of things. So I think there'll be a natural evolution of things in that way. And I'm not saying we'd rely on that, absolutely not, but it's use that in addition to
No, I agree. And I think from a client perspective, we see it over and over again as well. And so I have to commit to, I've been working in sustainability for a long time. I used to work for Unilever. And, you see it through the graduate program in the big organizations where, they want to go into sustainable companies. They want to be a part of that shift of the economy. And I think that you're absolutely right that, behavior change will happen as potentially our generation, or you look a little younger than, start to go out of the workforce. So, and I agree. But I think the question then from my perspective would be like, how do we reinforce that through KPIs so that during their day jobs, they're reminded every day that they have to do their jobs differently so that they're sustainable.
I mean, that's the G part now, isn't it? It's the governance of all of this. And I think ownership and representation are two very important things. So make sure that everybody across your business, not just the C-suite, not just the execs or the heads of the business, give everybody accountability for the ESG goals that you have, because I think it is everybody's responsibility. And make sure that it's measured. One of the key things being completely earnest, we relaunched our sustainability program in EMEA in 2020, redesigned it in 2020 because nobody was going out, the hotels were shut, so we had a great chance to do something, and then launched in 2021. And we went from 30 hotels participating in our program in the region to now 450 or so, and we've got 550 in the region. So we've seen a massive engagement there, and the way we've done it is by thinking big, but starting realistically, which is, let's at least measure these 5 things, which will be your key utility consumption, your employability statements, etc., and then we'll just measure them for a year. And as the business starts to recover back, we can start to lay over some seasonality, and we can start to do that. So now 2 years, 3 years later, we've got good data sets that have the abnormality of the pandemic included. They've now got sort of the new seasonality laid over them. And now we can actually see at a property level what's happening. So it's something that's simple, something that's repeatedly measurable, and now something that's manageable.
And I think that, again, it comes back to a generational thing. I actually think companies need to be brave, and with the new talent they're bringing in, let them do their thing. They kind of, especially, again, we don't want to always keep talking about COVID, but COVID was an opportunity for us to be really innovative as well and implement new ways of working. And I think, a lot of the people that I work in my organisation are considerably younger than me, and they are constantly thinking about ways to do things more efficiently that benefit their lifestyle, but also achieve the company's objectives. And I think it's kind of, we have our responsibilities now, but I think it's partly enabling the future talent to do what comes naturally to them, more naturally than it probably did to my generation. I'm very old.
Yeah. Well, coming from an industry that nobody understands, which is healthcare, so you probably talked with the doctor and didn't get anything that the person was telling you. We're very used to translating, and I feel that sustainability has that same problem. People don't really know what sustainability is. So I agree with the fact of measuring, but also teaching is very important. So the first thing we did was ask our employees, what do you think sustainability is? More than 70% said they didn't really know, which is normal because I didn't even know before I studied it. There's so many things going around here that people don't get. They only think it's carbon footprint and basically that. So being able to share knowledge with the people that you work with, I think it's very important. And then telling them, okay, now we're going to measure. And we started measuring. The first thing we measured was the energy consumption in large hospitals. You can imagine large hospitals have to be working. You just can't turn the lights off or the air conditioning. But you can definitely improve some things. And what we did was just put monitors in some hospitals and measure the consumption from one year to the other in the same days, same temperature, same everything. And it's funny because once you start measuring, suddenly consumption drops. So now we're going to do the same with printers because there's hundreds of thousands of paper printed. And we just talked with Canon that is finally going to be able to tell us how many prints you had in the past month. We're probably going to have the same effect without even telling them much more than what they printed. But also people have to know that maybe they can do it other ways. So the being able to train them is really important in what things they can actually do, because it's not, you can, for example, in a hospital you can't train everyone to be sustainable the same way. So, for example, the people in reception desk can be sustainable because they don't need to print so many things. But the people that are in the consultation rooms, maybe they can, separate the paper of the plastic, and that helps because you get more recycling. So it's different jobs, and you need to focus the training into different jobs. I'm guessing that it's the same in manufacturing, in hospitals, in hotels.
Hotels and hospitals are the same thing, but for different stages of life, really.
That's the same.
It's the products are the same. The whole things are pretty similar, but it's great. I think it's fantastic that it's important to do it very basically. If you don't start somewhere, you're never going to start. And I've faced quite a lot of criticism historically to say we're not doing enough, you're not doing it fast enough. Fine, I totally get that. But if we go about it the wrong way, or we start a full start and have to restart, and we don't get the message consistent, we don't get that right, we're not growing in a sustainable way, we're not getting it right. So I think it's brilliant that you're doing those things, because that's exactly where to start. And in that element of being able to report the benefits of what you're doing, I think the next steps, what do we do next, will come, because people are starting to see the benefit. You might be seeing a saving, you might be seeing an increase in employee satisfaction because they feel better about the way that they're working. That's a really great start. So it's good to hear, and I thoroughly endorse that approach. I think it's really good.
I have a really practical tip from the printer side. Just if you have more than one printer on each floor, get rid of it so that you only have one printer for each floor, and then make people walk.
We're still tracking some printers. We still don't know where they are, Where is it? So probably it's like hidden somewhere.
Hold up in someone's office so they don't have to walk at all, maybe. Yeah.
Okay, this sounds like the perfect time. The dinner party is winding down. We do have time for coffee, though, before we kick everyone out. So does anyone have any questions? If you do, please put your hand up and we'll get a microphone coming out. Everyone's been listening intently to the session. Lady just here, please. Please just state your name and where you're from, please.
Hi, how's it going? Kate Gran is my name. I work for an electrical contractor company. We build substations for, the big bad data centres, but also the renewable sector as well. I suppose I'm tasked with the mammoth task of setting up a sustainability department or an ESG department. Like, first of all, what do I call it? And then I suppose the second piece of advice, I know some of you mentioned about, building that department. Could you give me any advice or any tips or any negative things that happened to you in the past?
If you want, I can say, because I have it really fresh.
Yeah.
So I'm sure I didn't do everything well, but some things are turning out kind of good, I think. So the first thing is, if you're being asked to do something, ask back as much as you can. Then try to get whatever you can back, because now is the moment. Later, you're probably not going to be given it unless you bring some good results. And then what is working really, really well for me is making everyone participate. So we're a very large organization where people don't even know. So yesterday we had our ESG board, and I brought 4 guests from outside that I'm working in projects with. All my team is working with them in different projects, and they start saying things. And some people within that board that are high level of the company, they're the highest managers, C level, didn't even know it existed. So it's really interesting. You can create this space where people actually get to know each other, and then not only asking them to do stuff, but also to show them, because that's going to get your largest buy-in. So yesterday when we finished, they were like, thank you so much. It's the first time I'm sitting down in the same room with this person or this other person. Those would be 2 of the 200 tips, but I think those 2 are a good start, and I'm sure they can share more.
I think I would just add that really focus on your business and its impacts. So what you can make a real difference in, or with it, which is within your kind of strategic imperatives, because it has to mean something to your business. It has to mean something to your colleagues and your stakeholders. So doing something because it's easy or nice, I'd avoid doing. Stay away from philanthropic kind of things, but do something that's really relevant to your business and the impact it has.
Completely echo that. The thing I would add is make sure that what you're doing is measurable, so that you can start from a point of 0, 12 months later say, this is where we've changed. And then once you've got that sort of data data drives everything, doesn't it? But once you've got that data set and it's repeatedly measurable, you can then start to manage it and demonstrate progress and value against that.
Yeah. I think aside from a materiality assessment, which is, I think your critical first thing, if I were you, I would go home today and I would start researching materiality assessments. Yeah. And I would say to start with something that's quite meaty, something difficult, not low-hanging. And then my third bit of advice would be to hire people who know what they're doing. So hire practitioners, people who have done it before, not newbies, not people who have a nice shiny CV, but you're not quite sure what it's really about. Yeah?
Thanks.
Okay, that is the perfect opportunity for us to call this session to a close. Some fantastic speakers, some fantastic insights. Thanks so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Please show your appreciation for our panel. Thank you all.